No one saw this coming, not Washington, not Paris, not even the African Union. But on an electric morning, in June 2025, the world held its breath as two of the most polarizing and powerful men of their respective continents met behind closed doors in a location no media outlet had predicted: Ouagadougou. Ibrahim Traoré, the 34-year-old military captain turned president, reshaping Africa with fire and defiance. And Donald J. Trump, former US president and political phoenix, re-emerging on the global stage. One leads a revolution against neo-colonialism. The other represents the very system Traoré stands against. So why did this meeting happen? And what could possibly unite them? This is not just a handshake. It's a signal, a shift, and it could change the trajectory of Africa's future forever. When a continent rises, the world transforms. If you believe Africa is entering a bold new era, become part of this story and follow it from the beginning to the very end. On June 22nd, 2025, sources close to both the Burkina presidency and former US President Donald Trump confirmed that a closed-door meeting took place between Ibrahim Traoré and Trump in Ouagadougou, the capital of Burkina Faso. The meeting, which lasted approximately 3 hours, was reported by independent journalist Jean-Michel Laca for Le Continent Afrique, and later echoed by international outlets, including Reuters Africa and Al Jazeera. No Western media was present, no AU representatives were invited, no press conference followed. What is known is this: Traoré and Trump discussed economic independence, regional security, and a controversial new vision for resource-based trade outside the dollar system. But that's just the beginning of a story few are ready to tell. The presidential compound in Ouagadougou had never seen a morning like this. The capital, already alive with a new sense of dignity under Traoré's leadership, now bristled with rumors that defied logic and yet were true. A heavily guarded convoy had arrived just before dawn. Inside, Donald J. Trump. He didn't land in Paris. He didn't stop in Geneva. Instead, he came straight to the Sahel, to a land long ignored, misunderstood, or manipulated by world powers. And now the man who once helmed the United States stood face to face with the most defiant African leader of the 21st century. No flags, no red carpet, just power meeting purpose. In a windowless strategy room beneath the compound, Traoré greeted Trump with a grip as firm as the ground he stood on. The moment, captured only by internal security cameras, would later be described by aides as electric, not for the theatrics, but for the significance. Two radically different men from two radically different worlds, brought together not by friendship, but by necessity. Trump had come to listen, but Traoré, she, had come to declare. The room was silent, the tension almost physical. Trump leaned back, arms crossed, his signature smirk softened into curiosity. Traoré stood firm, flanked by his economic minister and military strategist. Then, without ceremony, he spoke. Africa no longer asks what the world can give it. We ask what we will reclaim. Trump raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Traoré continued laying out Burkina Faso's new resource doctrine. The state now controlled its gold, had plans to nationalize lithium, and was forming direct trade channels with allies who respected sovereignty, not dominance. Our people have bled for a freedom that will no longer be bartered in IMF halls, he said, and we won't be lectured by nations built on the wealth stolen from our soil. Then came the shock. Traoré proposed a new strategic bloc, not of dependence, but of interest-based alignment. A continent ready to deal on its own terms with any nation, even a post-American America. Trump, famously allergic to globalist entanglements, saw the opportunity. He didn't agree with everything, but he understood leverage when he saw it. He leaned forward. You want a new deal, not aid, not charity, real terms. Traoré nodded. Not for Burkina Faso, for Africa. Word of the meeting spread like wildfire, first through encrypted military channels, then across the digital veins of African youth networks. Images of Trump's convoy under Sahel skies. Unverified leaks of Traoré's voice asserting, "We deal with equals, not masters." The mainstream media fumbled, caught off guard by a meeting it neither predicted nor understood. In Lagos University, students debated the implications on live streams. In Bamako, AES ministers convened emergency strategy sessions. And in Washington, D.C., the State Department issued a vague, carefully worded statement about ongoing developments in West Africa. But everyone understood the message: something historic had just shifted. Inside the compound, Traoré and Trump reviewed a draft protocol, a framework of trade and security terms unthinkable just a year earlier. No mention of aid packages, no military bases, just mutual benefit. But it wasn't just about gold or arms. It was about dignity. Traoré declared, "The age of puppet regimes is over. Africa must speak with one voice, and that voice will not stutter." Trump, in his blunt style, replied, "You're not like the others. You're not waiting for someone to tell you what to do. That's why you'll win." The meeting was ending, but the real war was just beginning. As dusk settled over Ouagadougou, the two men parted with a simple nod. No cameras, no handshakes for headlines. But the ground beneath the African continent had shifted, not because Traoré had secured some secret deal, but because he had forced the world to reckon with a new kind of African leadership. That night, Traoré summoned his communications team. "Let the people know," he said. "Let them see that we will speak with anyone, presidents, former empires, global titans, but never from our knees." By morning, a single photo was released. Traoré standing in silhouette against the Sahel sunrise. The caption read, "Only Africa is no longer waiting." Across the continent, it ignited something ancient, yet reborn. A pride that couldn't be sanctioned, censored, or sold. From Nairobi's tech hubs to Kinshasa's street poets, the youth rose in digital waves, declaring allegiance not to any party or power, but to a vision that said Africa can lead, that it must lead, and that Ibrahim Traoré was no longer a regional anomaly, he was the prototype. In the days that followed, what began as whispers turned into a continental wave. The meeting between Traoré and Trump, once viewed as political impossibility, had triggered reactions from every corner of the global establishment. In Brussels, the European Union convened an emergency Africa strategy session. In Paris, senior defense officials expressed grave concern over what they called uncontrolled dialogue between strategic rivals. But they all misunderstood one thing. This wasn't about Trump, it was about Traoré. In Accra, youth movements began openly questioning their government's IMF dependency. In Dar es Salaam, economists debated Traoré's new mineral rights doctrine. And in Johannesburg, a popular podcast titled The Ouaga Doctrine skyrocketed in views breaking down Traoré's model of Pan-African bargaining power based not on desperation, but on resources and resolve. Meanwhile, Traoré's administration wasted no time. ES envoys were dispatched to Brazil, India, and Indonesia not for charity, but to forge strategic commodity exchanges and tech deals. African soil was no longer up for negotiation. It was a bargaining chip, a foundation, a declaration. And Traoré, he made it clear, if we are rich in gold, uranium, lithium, and youth, then why are we poor in power? He wasn't asking the world, he was asking Africans. The international press scrambled to reframe the narrative. The New York Times called the Traoré-Trump meeting a populist performance. Le Monde Afrique warned of a new strongman syndrome. But on the ground, none of that mattered. Because in markets and mosques, classrooms and construction sites, the truth was echoing louder than headlines. Africa had just looked global power in the eye and didn't blink. AES leaders rallied behind Traoré. Niger's General Tiani called it the turning point for African diplomacy. Mali's Assimi Goïta declared, "We no longer need to ask for a seat at any table. We are building our own." But Traoré wasn't celebrating, he was organizing. The Pan-African Resource Summit was announced within days, a gathering to be hosted in Ouagadougou, not Paris, not New York. Every African nation was invited with one condition: leave foreign handlers at the door. And one more surprise followed. Trump agreed to send observers, not as enforcers, but as guests. It was a geopolitical inversion the world wasn't ready for. The man once considered a disruptor in the West had now been used as a tool by Africa's most fearless revolutionary to open a new chapter. Not in protest, but in power. Then came the revelation that turned speculation into seismic shock. Leaked documents from a whistleblower within the AU revealed that several African heads of state, previously vocal against Traoré, had been secretly requesting private audiences with him through unofficial channels. These were the same leaders who once condemned the military-led rise in Burkina Faso. Now, behind closed doors, they sought guidance. Why? Because Traoré had done the unthinkable. He had won public trust without foreign aid. He had restored sovereignty without a single Western signature. And now, presidents elected under foreign-backed democracies were beginning to fear their own youth more than they feared their donors. Inside the leaked files was a message from one Central African president to an AU official. Traoré is not a man, he is a moment, and that moment is coming for all of us. With the leak confirmed, panic gripped the AU. In an emergency internal session, veteran diplomats admitted what many had whispered for months: Ibrahim Traoré had become the de facto voice of African sovereignty. Not by conquest, not by mandate, but by sheer force of example. What came next was unthinkable. The African Union, for the first time in its history, formally invited Traoré to deliver a keynote address at the next AU summit in Addis Ababa, not as a suspended leader, but as a guest of honor. The man they once banished was now being asked to guide. When the news broke, the continent erupted. In the Sahel, villages held night vigils. In Kinshasa, murals of Traoré replaced ads for foreign telecoms. Traoré didn't gloat, he didn't celebrate. He simply released one line: Africa has always had leaders. What we lacked was the courage to follow ourselves. And with that, the balance of power, diplomatic, psychological, spiritual, had tilted. Africa's era of permission was over. Burkina Faso stands transformed. a nation reborn from centuries of imposed limits into a beacon of sovereignty and hope. Schools flourish, industries thrive, and the people walk with heads held high, free from foreign dictates. Under Ibrahim Traoré's fearless leadership, Africa's future is no longer borrowed. It is forged by its own hands. In his words, "We did not ask for permission to be free. We stood up to win it." If the resilience and indomitable spirit of Ibrahim Traoré has touched your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Share this story far and wide so that the light of hope and strength can spread across the continent. Subscribe to our channel and join us on our journey to build a new Africa where each of our children can stand tall and proud, no longer bowing to injustice, oppression, or subjugation. This is a journey of awakening, of solidarity, and of strong belief in a bright future. God bless Africa, the land of vitality, of courage, and of undying dreams.